Welcome back to the Latino Slant. Make sure you are subscribed and to our newsletter on the latinoslant.com. Pues vamos. ¿Qué pasó, everyone? Back here on the Latino Slant with Fletcher Williams.
¿Qué pasó?
Hey, I have a question for you.
All right.
Who is more Latina, Anya Taylor-Joy or Jenna Ortega? Go.
Wow. Well, if we look at those two, I would say Jenna Ortega looks more Latina than Anya Taylor-Joy. But based on some of the comments,
you're discriminating, sir. You have discriminated against a white Latina.
How dare I? Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, here's what we're gonna do, guys. This is kind of interesting. We're going to talk about the Anya Taylor-Joy situation. It's not a really big situation, but it kind of came up again, connected to what Jenna Ortega has said in a recent Vanity Fair article. Huge article she did. It's gonna be huge. It's gonna be great. But then also, too, this video where we can break down, because like Anya Taylor-Joy, Fletcher Williams is also an Argentinian.
What? Dun, dun, dun. The plot thickens.
So let's go to Covered Geekly. Anya Taylor-Joy being described as a woman of color baffles viewers. I saw this, and, Covered Geekly has, tons of followers, all that stuff. And I thought this was interesting. Actress Anya Taylor-Joy is described as a woman of color by Variety in 2021. The description quickly sparked confusion online as Taylor-Joy has consistently identified herself as a white Latina. She is, in fact, half English, UK, half Argentinian. Correct me if I'm wrong, Fletcher.
No, right. Born in Miami, I believe.
Born in Miami. That's right. Yeah. Scottish Argentine father. How does that work out? Because there's a lot of fair-skinned Argentinians, right? Or
right. So there's a lot of Argentinians of European descent, and also she, I believe, her parents are like ambassadors or something like that. So they traveled a lot. That's why she was born in the United States. But yeah, her mother tongue is the Spanish, told with a very heavy Argentinian accent. Sometimes I think she goes in and out of it. She's very well to actually have it, but a lot of people do claim that Argentina is very white, but it does have a lot of diversity in the shades of color of people that are here. It's just
we're talking about her experience, her the way she grew up as a person in this world, right? This is the makeup of her family, which I think is fascinating. Yes, she speaks perfect Spanish. She even says it's my first language.
Right.
Whenever you hear her interviews, it sounds lovely. In this post, the error was swiftly corrected after being widely shared and criticized on social media. The magazine updated the article to reflect that Taylor-Joy identifies as a white Latina. I thought this was interesting, so I put in my 2 cents, which has gotten over 500 likes, by the way. Just want to say. There's a video where she speaks Spanish to Jenna Ortega and Ziegler, and they have no idea what she's saying. And I just said language and culture is a wonderful thing. Don't judge a book by its cover.
Correct.
Fletcher, what say you?
No, it is, because they have... I mean, the funniest thing is when we were living in Mexico, we were in the southern part of Mexico, and there was no Spanish spoken. It was all actually a dialect of the area, and that was just the way it is. And you have anybody, if you traveled anywhere around the world, even if you go to China, Mandarin is not the main language in certain areas of China. Shock. Gotcha. Spanish is not the only language that is spoken in Argentina. So you have a lot of mix of cultures from all over the world and all over places. So sometimes we're put into this little Latino bubble that is so vast that really can't contain all the wonderful cultures that we are. That's why sometimes, like you said, you can't judge a book by its cover, and a little leniency and a little careful digging sometimes need to take place.
Now, let's go to the Vanity Fair article. Do you have it up?
I do.
Okay, so it's fascinating, man. There's a lot here. We'll be covering the different aspects of this article throughout the next week, but Here, Ortega reckons with the moving target of representation. She grew up smashing piñatas and making tamales at Christmas with her Mexican American and Puerto Rican family. So she's full on Latina, like as
Right.
far as the makeup of her parents, right?
Right.
But she didn't grow up speaking Spanish. It was not taught to her, and she did not grow up in a Spanish speaking country. She grew up in the Coachella Valley, which is Palm Springs, Coachella, in the desert of Southern California. And she goes on to say, I'm so jealous every time I hear my mom speaks perfect Spanish. I have
Mm.
to tell you, that is exactly how I grew up.
Right.
And add to my me back in the day, because she refers to her tias, her aunts, how they were scolded for speaking Spanish at school. That happened to me, and that was like the late 70s. It was the last time I spoke Spanish in public, and then none of my family spoke to me. I remember this teacher using a ruler, and he'd smack my hand because I was speaking Spanish.
Right.
That was a thing. It's
Yep.
not a thing now. It's not a thing now,
No.
right? So do you got any comments about what I just said in regards to Jenna's upbringing?
No, I agree. I think sometimes people don't understand that a lot of things happen back in the day. So, should we say now a lot of cultural norms that are different than the current ones are more accepted? You're seen as almost more exotic, in a sense, when you
Mm-hmm.
do speak a different language. But like you said, back in the days, there was some persecution about this, and a lot of people did suffer because of it. Jenna and yourself being two of them.
This is fascinating because she brings up the Christian Dior Paris fashion show last year. A video shows Anya Taylor Joy, who spent her early years in Buenos Aires, introducing her husband to Ortega and Spanish pop star Rosalia in Spanish, and Ortega replying in English. Snark ensued. It stung to be deemed an imperfect representative of a culture to which Ortega herself wishes she was more connected. I think there's more. I think there's a part of me that carries a lot of shame right
Mm,
there. That is a completely American experience, or whatever that assimilation that's not all the way done, and yet you're expected to speak perfect Spanish on both sides,
correct. Yeah.
right? From Latinos and from the American culture. In this case, the American culture. That's the shame. I think that's fantastic. She says, for a second, I was almost nervous to speak about my family's background because I felt like I was made to feel like it wasn't. She stops before saying valid or
Mm,
some variation thereof. Ortega
wow.
wants to become more in touch with her roots, to learn more from her tias who immigrated to the United States, who were told not to speak Spanish as school children, as to not stand out. Absolutely, 100%. We talked about that. But also something that I'm learning, she says, it's not my job to carry the weight of everyone who's ever had that experience.
Right.
So she's like, she is not about the victim or the virtue because I think it's nowadays it's like you see a lot of actors who have that experience standing up on their soapbox screaming this.
Right.
Ortega says firmly, nor should language or birth country define her identity, especially when assimilation as a Latin as is as Latin an experience as anything. What are your thoughts there?
No, it does bring up like a lot of questions in the culture that, especially in the
Mm-hmm.
culture that she's in, because it's a very interesting, very artistic culture that sees differences sometimes as a plus, and sometimes if it's differences maybe that they don't agree with, or maybe have become stale in the society, shall we say, that hey, that's not a pro that different proclivity. But she's basically taking a stand that while I do feel these emotions and I did have these things happen, they're not going to define me or scar me. I'm gonna be who I am. And she says to herself, she's Latina, she's of Mexican, Puerto Rican descent. She's gonna be proud of that part, while not putting too much weight on being a victim of other people's ire, maybe.
Absolutely. I think we have to remember too that she's 22. No, I think she's gonna be 22
I believe so.
at
Yeah,
this time, right?
Right.
And you're talking about the last 2 years of stardom for her. It's unprecedented, and she's a household name. So I guess what I'm saying is that she's still growing up in front of our eyes. And I know there's been a lot of pushback and criticism from early things she's said and done on social media as a kid that I think are just unfair.
I
And go ahead.
I agree. I think it's very unfair that you take this kind of stance, especially this early in her career, where she's basically figuring out who she is.
Well, I hope she learns from other instances, and I hope that she really exercises in this article as well, where she talks about not being politically correct and letting people have their opinions without getting canceled. Because in the past, she didn't exercise that herself. That's a whole nother topic. Let's get
Yes.
back to this, right? When it comes to language and culture, I find this fascinating. I have the video up. Do you have the video? This is the actual video from last year.
Yeah.
Anya, and yeah. So we're going to play this. But basically, Anya says, Ese es mi, how do you say that? My husband?
Ese es mi esposo.
Mi esposo, she says marido.
Oh, marido. Okay.
Marido.
Let's see.
Ese es mi marido. So let's check this video out. Watch Jenna's reaction. So there's Rosalia, and she says, this is thank you in English or hello in English.
Yeah. They're like how are you?
And Jennifer Lawrence in the background, but she got eviscerated. She said, yeah, nice to see you. She got eviscerated for this, man. And that's not fair.
It's just crazy.
That's not fair. That again, that's a lot of U.S. Latinos experiences more than ever. So, yeah, I think looking back at this picture of Anya Taylor-Joy and Jenna Ortega, it's like who's more Latina? They both are. Obviously, Anya knows the language, so she could communicate to more Latinos, Spanish speakers, and yet Jenna, by looks, carries that look of what people would think is a Mexican or a Latina woman. What do you think?
No, I agree. I think it's a lot of misconceptions about basically even just decorum. I mean, if you are introduced to somebody, you just you agree. I mean, you stand out your hand and you say, hey, nice to meet you. And sometimes if you don't know the language, a lot of people, this goes along the way of saying that maybe it's not a culture thing where people are not cultured enough or traveled enough. I mean, if you're in Germany, France, Japan, some people, if you don't speak the language properly, they'll actually answer you in like English,
Yep.
or Spanish, because you're too rough on the language. So I'm gonna be proper for you to answer in your native tongue. So in other words, it's also in other countries it's seen as I'm being polite to you by answering you in the tongue that I know you understand, that I speak better. So which country are you applying the rules to, and what international decorum are you applying the rules to? Because there's different ones.
Right. In this example, you had, for better words, two American-born people, and one that just grew up in an Americanized culture. With Jenna, she went right from the English-speaking household to the movie sets, TV sets, and like you said, Anya Taylor-Joy is, she's traveled the world. She actually was reared for some formative years in Argentina. Completely different experience. Both are valid. I just want to leave it as this. In my experience, in relearning the language, and I know about the shame. I think what's amazing, and there's a lot of liberation in when you kind of like take that chance and maybe, hola Fletcher, ¿cómo estás?
Oh, tranquilo, Poli, ¿cómo andas?
Todo aquí bien, pero necesito practicar mi español. You will automatically welcome that and you'll encourage that. Correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the shame comes from our families kind of making fun of us, so we just don't do it. We just don't
Right.
speak it
Yeah.
because they'll correct us, they'll shame us as family members do.
Right.
I think what happens for me is that when I run into a neighbor that speaks very little English, or someone that I know speaks really good Spanish, I'm gonna struggle through it and have a little interaction because it helps me. And I just think it's an interesting thing. Also, too, Fletcher, people are like, oh, it's identity politics. It's you're being woke. You're what does it matter? We're all human. Well, this is how I was raised, right?
Right.
That Americans, gringos, family, then Spanish speakers were all like, "How come you don't speak Spanish? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
What's wrong with
Yeah.
you?"
I mean, this is a crazy thing because what are you doing? What parameters are you applying? If
Yeah.
you want people to, it's kind of like the funny thing about the melting pot of America, this
Mm-hmm.
great experiment, because you're
Mm.
saying at one point, you're saying we want you to become, acclimated to America. You speak English and you do things in English. And now you have like this almost like a subculture of, wait a minute, we want you to be original to your actual culture. Don't lose
Mm.
that. Don't even speak English properly, or have all this kind of things where we're like, wait a minute, well, which is it, right?
Mm-hmm.
What parameters are you setting to yourself? I think the best parameter is where your family doesn't shame you into, not learning the language or not having language. You
Sure.
learn English properly so you can function as a member of society and you know what's going on. You see that a traffic light or you read something and you're like, can understand it. Yeah, that's fine. But at the same time, you can still keep your language. You can still enjoy it. But I don't see why shaming somebody for not having your verbal aptitude. For all we know, she's fluent in Mojica, right? Or she's fluent in Toltec, right? So does that make her more Latina?
Right. Right. We haven't even talked about that whole thing because, correct. It's safe to say that, Jenna's ancestors have more indigenous in them as opposed to Anya Taylor Joy's indigenous is from Scotland.
Right.
Which again, it's all fascinating, guys. So listen, and we'll put the links into the video box description of all the stories that we just referred to, and stay tuned for more, coverage on Latino entertainment here from Latino Cent. Thank you so much, Fletcher. We'll see you on the next
Yep.
one.
Thank you. Later.